evening and welcome to another episode of Pegasus Presents. I'm Lauren Stefanelli, Access Coordinator here at Pegasus. And today we've got a guest representing the Encore Players, the Community Theater of Trumansburg. Representing them is Louise Adey, who was recently in a one-woman show presented by the Encore Players. Welcome, Louise. It's nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Lauren.
And maybe you could just start out by telling us, who are the Encore Players?
Encore Players was started by two dynamic people in Trumansburg, Alice Ploss and Ann Bialke, and they had worked together in the Trumansburg school system for many years, co-producing plays for, at least 15 years, maybe 18 years.
Inside the schools?
Inside the schools in Trumansburg, and they had tremendous success. The kids, the two of them together, Anne and Alice, are a very, very dynamic duo, extremely talented and in many ways. And they were able to get across their enthusiasm to the students. Many, many, many students have found their voices through theater in Trumansburg and have gone on to become performers and teachers themselves. There's a tremendous amount of talent in Trumansburg, which I'm sure a lot of people are aware. And this talent seems to come together with this theater group. It's very, I use the word dynamic, but that's a very, very good word for them, for the entire organization.
Well, how did you find the Encore Players?
Well, I do happen, when you live in a small town, pretty much you know everybody. Alice is also our choral director and has been directing Trumansburg Community Chorus for probably 20 years. She's been the choir director in the Presbyterian Church. Ann Bialke, her partner in Encore Players, has also been in the chorus and the choir for many, many years. And I've been in chorus for probably 5 or 6 years now. So in a small town, as I said, we kind of know everybody. When Encore Players came together, they attracted a very broad spectrum group of people with various skills that they could bring. And so through these skills, they've developed a very, very strong following. The first 2 seasons, they had a musical in the summer, which was wonderful because it involved children. Oliver was one of them, and Music Man was another. Mm-hmm. This past season, they put on a play that never made it to Broadway, and it should have. It was hilarious. There was great singing and dancing, and it was called Lucky Stiff. I can run down through our 5 productions.
And probably it'll ring a bell with some people who may have seen some of them.
Sure. Starting last spring in, I think it was April, actually it was March, a group of women were together on stage, and they were taking turns doing readings from Nora Ephron. And the book is called I Feel Bad About My Neck and Other Thoughts on Being a Woman. And the timing of these and the theatrical experience behind these 6 women who were on stage is very, very wide and had great depth. So these readings were hilarious. The next production was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Now, the stage production of this is different from the movie. It's a bit edgy. And I was in that. I had a non-speaking part, and that was wonderful for me. But the acting was superb in this play. And then we had Lucky Stiff, the summer musical. I'm not sure that every summer will be a musical, but so far 3 of them.
Well, so you're starting to get a rhythm in the group.
A little bit of a rhythm, I think, but I think we overdid it this year with 5 productions. Mm-hmm. So it may be scaled back to the original intention of having 3, and we'll wait and see what happens in 2017 for that. One of the productions, the 4th production, was something called The Haunted Barn. And the person who organized that and directed it had a number of actors. I think there were 15 to 20 people, and they were in different parts of the barn, and they staged. It was quite a grotesque and gory production, but it was really, really well done. I was there for 3 nights as one of the concession people, and of course I went through it more than once just to see all the blood and gore and to see all the acting. The acting
so it was for
superb.
Halloween.
It was for Halloween. Yes,
okay.
It was for 1 full weekend just before Halloween, and the theme of it was the butcher shop. So it was quite gory.
Oh my goodness!
Extremely well done. And
This
then
isn't
fifth
the one that was in
production-
Enfield, is it?
I'm sorry?
Was it in Enfield?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay, because there was one near me that was doing that. Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Okay.
Yeah, and there were lots and lots of screams. So obviously people were frightened out of their
That's what the
wits.
ad said. They were trying to give you as many screams per minute as we can squeeze in.
And they really did a job. And it helped to have actors doing that because they could really step into the role and step out of themselves. They were very, very believable and very frightening. I mean, when I went through the second time, you know, I was supposed to know what was coming at me, but I didn't. And I was really caught off guard. I didn't, well, actually I did. The woman ahead of me was screaming. So you held onto a rope. And so you went through with this group and you were very close to each other. The woman in front of me started screaming. I started screaming. Anyway, so it was very, very effective.
Wow.
And the actors were wonderful. And then the last production was
So
mine.
that brings us up to your production.
Yes, yes, yes. And that was just, I guess, a week ago. And that was 3 productions. I've worked in Antarctica as a kayak guide and historian on this ship. I give lectures about the early Antarctic explorers. So this was a material that was very, very familiar to me.
First tell us what the name of the play was and basically what it was.
Sure. The play was called The Last Viking,
Okay.
how Roald Amundsen took the South Pole. It became a race to the South Pole that hadn't started out as a race, but it became one.
So this is the
when-
era of the great explorers.
Yes, this is the early Antarctic exploration era, which ran from 1895 to 1912. And it took in some of the well-known players, such as Sir Ernest Shackleton and Captain Robert Falcon Scott, as well as Roald Amundsen. And it was Amundsen who actually got to the South Pole first. The remarkable thing about his story is that he was extremely efficient and very, very well trained for this, as opposed to most of the other expeditions that went to attempt to get to the South Pole. They weren't nearly as trained, they weren't nearly as prepared, and they were not nearly as focused and organized. So therefore, because he made it to the pole so efficiently, and because all of the other expeditions experienced drama, it was the drama that pretty much eclipsed his expedition and took the glamour of his story away
Wow.
for decades.
So I saw this performance,
Uh-huh.
and I kind of got the impression that you actually put the material together and you wrote it, but there was also a little bit of an explanation about why you chose this particular person to portray. You actually portray the explorer yourself. So how did you come to choose him, and how did you come to put this together?
Thank you. That's a very good question. My parents were Norwegian, and they came over after World War II. I was born kind of on the way, and my older brother was born in Norway, and my younger sister was born here in the U.S. So the stories about the Arctic explorers, the polar explorers of Norway, were the stories of our childhood. We heard these stories, and we knew them from childhood. But what I didn't know, I had always assumed that this man, Amundsen, was a stoic, hard man and with a cold heart. And the more I read his story, his autobiographies, he has 2. One is called To the South Pole, and the other one is called My Life as an Explorer. And then the biographies about him. The more I read, the more I realized he really was a very kind-hearted man. So it was when he spent 2 years with the Nitsalik Inuits in the north of Canada, living with the Inuits, that's when he discovered his true warm self. They brought out, through their childlike humor and way of approaching life, they brought out just the sweetest things in him. He became a very kind, warm, easygoing man when he was in their company.
So
And
by
this-
reading these biographies, you realized you could identify with him a little bit? He wasn't just a cardboard cutout hero, he was a real guy.
That's a great way to put it. I was not great at history in high school. It was my worst subject. But there was one history teacher I really loved, and his name was Marvin Mitterer. He was a very, very beloved teacher in Trumansburg and later became a counselor in the school district. He worked in the school district for probably 35 years, I think, I would have to say. And he brought history to life in the way that no other person ever had. Well, I was still turned off to history because it was all about wars
Dates,
and
wars,
generals.
who beat who, what date,
Yeah, and it was fighting.
how many
and it was
people died in whatever conflict.
Exactly. And so when I discovered later in my life all of these explorers, they were just men. They were just the guy next door who happened to have
An obsession about something that they would
Exactly.
not let it go.
Exactly right. So that's why I got really interested in him, because he was a very human person. But also Shackleton. I had done that story, Sir Ernest Shackleton. I had done that story 2 years ago as a play also, and played the part. And he also was a very, very warm, kind human being. And his men loved him. Also, Amundsen's men loved him. And when you have very, very strong leadership, you get a tremendous amount of loyalty and devotion from the men working for you. Robert Falcon Scott didn't have that. He was a military man through and through. He was militaristic. He took that military code or division of labor right to the nth degree. But Shackleton and Amundsen were very warm-hearted men, and therefore the men loved them.
Well, so you knew these stories as a child. You became interested when you were older and had a great history professor and read these biographies, and then you told some of these stories as a leader of kayak tours in the where were the kayak tours? In Alaska?
Antarctica.
In Antarctica.
Yeah.
So you told these stories on those tours,
Right.
and now you decided to take it one step further and actually make a one-person play about it. And did you write the whole thing?
Well, I didn't write a script. I have a very hard time memorizing lines, but I know my material. So when I give my lectures aboard the ship, these are 50-minute lectures with slides, and I have quite a collection of slides that I like to use.
So they sort of serve as guides of where you are in the presentation.
Exactly.
And there's slides in this performance, too.
Yes, I had 25 slides in the performance, which I felt helped to illustrate the story.
So maybe now's a good time for us to show a clip. We've got
sure.
a couple clips picked out. Why
Yep.
don't you tell us what one clip that you'd like to show us from your performance?
Sure, thanks for asking. The Northwest Passage was the very first expedition that Roald Amundsen did from Norway, going from the northern Atlantic to the western. He went west. The Northwest Passage is pretty much 400 miles long, with the mainland of Canada on the left to the south, and on the right to the north is an enormous archipelago of islands filled with treacherous channels. And so this 400-mile passage goes from the North Atlantic to the North Pacific. And for 4 centuries, men had tried to get through the Northwest Passage. And
failed and died,
failed.
so on. But this clip is going to
Amundsen
show
made it.
how he decided to do it, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at the first clip that Louise has brought to show from her one-woman show of Roald Amundsen. How did I do on that?
Great. Perfect.
Deciding to traverse the Northwest Passage. Take a look.
I had it in mind that I was going to go to the North Pole, but if he already tried to get to the North Pole and didn't make it, maybe I should shorten this trip somehow, do something different, something nobody had ever done before. So now I set my sights on the Northwest Passage. This is an intriguing channel, a group of channels that stretches for hundreds and hundreds of miles off the north coast of Canada, and it goes all the way nearly to the pole. If you're going to traverse this 400-mile passage from the North Atlantic to the North Pacific, you need to actually get through all of these channels. It's very, very difficult. For 4 centuries, ships had tried to make the Northwest Passage and failed. The most notable one was the expedition around 1850 by Sir John Franklin. Here was an Englishman who took about 130 men with him aboard 2 ships, the Erebus and the Terror. And they got to within, between halfway, 3/4 of the way or something, and then the ship sank with all men, all hands lost. There was never a trace of the ships or the men until very recent modern times. The settlement was discovered, and they discovered how they lived, and the Inuits had discovered this settlement. And so when the next expeditions came along, they passed this information to the white men, so they at least knew where the settlement was. And this was common history for a very, very long time. But when I read his books, and I read about him, I wanted to suffer like they did. I wanted to suffer, but I wanted to live. And I wanted to come back and talk about it. I wanted to tell the tale.
Okay, we're back. So now we got to see you portraying a man, basically. What was it like portraying a man on stage?
I don't think anything of it. Maybe I'm an androgynous person to start with. I don't know. I worry about that for maybe 1 or 2 seconds. Like, am I going to be believable as a man? Well, who cares? I don't worry about it too much. It's a story, and I get to go into more depth doing it this way than I do on the ship when I give a 15-minute lecture. On the ship, I'm talking about, I'm in the third person.
Yes, he did this, he did that, but in this play, I did this and I did that. And I actually found it believable. Of course, you're not a 6-foot-tall guy,
right.
So the fact that there aren't other players on stage with you, other male players, making you look little, like people do on my show all the time. And big guy sits down here, and I look like a dwarf, and I'm like, but you make me, you're the same size as me, so I look just the right size next to you.
Yeah.
But if you're on the stage by yourself, you could be any size.
I forget how little I am. I really do. I mean, we're just who we are. We're in our bodies, and we go through life in our bodies, and whatever that is, it is. But then all of a sudden, you stand next to somebody who's 6 foot tall, and you really do look shrimpy. And I don't think of that.
Well, I think the fact that the mountain was fairly petite on the set and other things kind of helped a little, the fact that you were there by yourself. And I think also your sense of excitement about what was happening meant that you really brought his personality and his obsession and his excitement about something to life.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thanks.
well, it's actually a really good performance. So now would be let's take a look at another clip. See
Sure.
something else that you brought. The whole performance is an hour and a half long, and for some of the time slots where we're playing this studio talk show, we're following the talk show with the complete 1.5-hour performance of The Last Viking. So you can look at your Cable 13 channel listing and see if the complete performance is coming up next. Otherwise, keep abreast of Channel 13 and you'll see. But now we're going to show another clip, and tell us what we're going to see.
Well, there was a turning point for him, for Amundsen. He had completed the Northwest Passage, and he had pretty much worldwide acclaim for that. Now he was anxious and eager to attempt another expedition, and no one had gotten to the North Pole. So that was next in sight for him. However, he opened up the newspaper in 1909, and Cook and Peary, 2 explorers, had claimed to have made it to the North Pole, and he was quite devastated by this news. So here's the clip we're going to see about that.
All right, take a look.
When all of a sudden, in 1909, I opened the newspaper to find that Cook and Peary had both claimed to get to the North Pole. I was devastated. Why would I go somewhere other men have already been? Why would I do that? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to think. Well, my Antarctic experience on the Belgica came up in my mind, and I decided right then and there that I would take the Fram and our men to Antarctica. But now here's the dilemma. If I announce this in public in Norway, the funding would stop or dry up because they didn't believe that we could get to Antarctica. It was too far away. Our ship wouldn't be good enough. It wouldn't be big enough. I had so many doubts about, I couldn't trust that it could happen, but I had to make it happen. So I kept it a secret. This was my big deception.
Okay, we're back. I hope by now you're completely convinced that Louise can portray a famous explorer of the South Pole. And there were a lot of people. I looked on the sheet here. This was the program from the event, and there's lots of people that helped make this happen. Tell us a little bit about some of the people that made your dream to portray this come alive.
Well, I think anything that you get to do with Encore players is going to give you already a team that is well-oiled and accustomed to working with each other and very accustomed to working in the theater. So I had a great deal of help. I had a director who helped me with some of the acting sequences and how to make things come alive a little bit more. And then the lighting, we had brand new lighting this year. And it just arrived about 2 weeks ago. So the lighting went up, and the lighting was fantastic. But it took a little bit of expertise with help from someone at Cornell. And we have some gifted people on our team who are very, very good with that. I did the costuming myself just because I enjoy it, as well as the set design. And when you mentioned petite and small, I don't know if you noticed, but I had a very small stage. So all of the features in the set were also scaled way down, very small, just to give it an idea. I didn't have full-size anything there.
Right. One thing that was really interesting there was the portrayal of the slides, how it's like we've got a mountain, a white snow-covered mountain, and then all of a sudden we're seeing slides on them. Do you have a clip that shows some of those slides being shown and how you present them?
Yes, I think we do have a clip.
Okay, we have time for just one more clip. So what
Okay.
have you got that could show us how the slides worked on the set?
Okay, so this was very fun. We had Amundsen. I keep thinking I'm Amundsen still. It's hard to step out of the role sometimes. Amundsen and his men had put the hut up. It took them 6 days, and they got the hut up. It had been prefabricated in Norway. They brought it by ship. They put the hut up. They'd been settled in for about a week. And then when all of a sudden there was a ship pulling in behind their ship that was anchored next to the ice flow.
So they're parked as far into the middle of nowhere as you could possibly be, and somebody pulls up behind them.
Yes, yes, and it's a square rigger ship with all the sails up, and it's looking very, very elegant and official and very threatening. So this next clip will show. It talks about what happened when the ship pulled up and they realized that it was the Brits, and they had to look good in front of the Brits. So here's the clip.
Oh, okay. Well, take a look.
After we got the hut up, we were in the hut for about a week or so, and one morning, someone yelled out, "Ship ho!" What do you mean, ship ho? So we all went out for a look, and sure enough, there was a ship pulling up to the ice behind our ship. It could only be Scott's ship, the Terra Nova. Well, I had to let the Englishmen know what the Norwegians were made of. So we quickly hooked up some dogs to the sled. I got out my whip, put on all my furs. I cracked that whip, and we went down that ramp. The men were on skis. They were blistering to show off. We had a wonderful, wonderful reception, of course. They were a little stunned. The first thing I noticed was that there was no wire running up the mast. This would indicate that they did not have wireless on the ship, which translates to, gosh, if they make it to the South Pole first, they can't tell anybody. Well, that was very good to know. That was good knowledge. So we went aboard. We were invited aboard. It was breakfast time. They served us a very, very beautiful, proper English breakfast, kippers, tea, as much as we wanted. We were polite, and they were even more polite. But when it came to the questions about each other's expeditions, the questions were very guarded. We couldn't ask direct questions because we didn't want to appear ignorant or nosy. There was a lot of information I would have asked for. But they did let slip that they had motorized sledges. This put the fear of God in me. Because what if those motorized sledges could get them to the South Pole without any effort?
And we're back. I hope you enjoyed these little peeks. And again, this may be one of the presentations of this talk show where the entire 90-minute performance follows. So take a look at your channel. Don't leave channel 13 until you see if that's the case. Otherwise, keep an eye out for it because we will be running it over the next couple of months. So Louise, we're just about out of time, but it would be a good time for you to mention the website of Encore Players, and so that I understand the 2017 season has not been announced yet, but people maybe could look back there and find out about it. Where can we find out about the next season?
Absolutely. That would be, I just want to make sure I get it straight. So it's encoreplayers. I believe, yes, org.
Encoreplayers.org.
Yep. And it's ENCORE, players.org. The website is thorough and very informative, and I would give it about a month into the new year to see what the 2017 productions will be. And if the past 3 years has been any indication, they're going to be absolutely fantastic, stellar, fun, very, very, very highly talented people involved.
Louise, thank you so much for coming. I really enjoy getting to talk to you, and I enjoy getting to see your play. It was just marvelous, and thanks for being my guest.
Thank you so much, Lauren. It's been a pleasure to be here. You're a delightful hostess, and I'm so glad you had a chance to see one of our productions, and I hope you'll come back too.
I certainly will, and I'll keep an eye on that website. Thanks for all of you for joining us, and be sure to check out the complete performance playing exclusively on PEGASYS. Thanks for joining us. Good night.